There we go. We got a nice crisp can opening here of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. And again, thank you all for tuning in. We got another great episode. I know I always say that, but I mean, really, thank you to all the guests that join the podcast, because every one of the guests is what makes it great, right? You all want to hear about what the guests want to say, not particularly what I want to say. So this time, another great guest, Jody Quinn. I mean, this guy is awesome. One of my favorite anglers, in my opinion. I mean, top of the game right now when you're talking about the best anglers, kayak anglers competing around in tournament scenes. I mean, you got to start off the list with Jody Quinn, right? He's been doing it for so long, and it's always been so consistent. I'm sorry. So I'm really excited to have him on. I've listened to some of the interviews he's done both on the KBN and the Reel Down when they do a big win, when he has a big win and kind of reviews what he did of it. I mean, I learned so much from Jody Quinn just listening. I could listen to Jody Quinn talk about fishing all day and gather so much information. His breakdown of what he did in the Susquehanna River, not just this year, but the last year, last season at the Hobie BOS, or was it KBF? One of those two. But anyways, Susquehanna, I think it's pretty much Hobie BOS. Last year, 2020. He won it in 2021 as well, defended the title. But that breakdown on that podcast that he did of how he won it, I thought it was podcast gold. Like, if you really want to learn kayak fishing or fishing in general, go look up Jody Quinn on any podcast. We're also going to talk about his YouTube channel that he's starting. I'm again, a lot of information that if you want to learn and get better, you're going to really love his YouTube channel. Before we get into Jody Quinn, I wanted to give a shout out to Christine Fisher. Go follow her on Midwestern Fishing Gal. I think that's the name of her social media. She did a post on, I saw it on Facebook. I'm assuming it's going to be on her Instagram as well. But she did a post, I think today. Again, today is, what is it today? Today is Thursday, October 21st. But what I want to talk about that, and huge shout out to her, is what I think every one of us should be doing. And especially persons like myself that have a podcast and are trying to promote the sport, and we are very protective of the community and the growth of the sport. What she did is she highlighted the positive things that are going on in kayak fishing right now, which happens every day, which is the majority of the things that happen in kayak fishing. And she highlighted some of the persons. She made specific comments of some of the great things they're done and they're doing. And I think that's very important, because oftentimes, and even I'm guilty of it with my podcast, we don't like it when people go about things what we feel are the wrong way, and it's not healthy for the kayak fishing community. And oftentimes we either blog about it, say it on the podcast, and we single them out. We single out the negative stuff we see because we're protective of this, But what we really should be doing, all of us, is instead of focusing on the negative stuff, which is really a small percentage of what goes on, and on the negative people, which again, it's very small percentage of the people in the kayak fishing community. We should be highlighting the great stuff that goes on, the selfless actions, the great camaraderie, and we should highlight the people that are promoting that, because that's going to inspire us to do better, instead of giving promotions kind of like by accident of the negative stuff and maybe negative people that might be involved in the kayak fishing community. And again, that's from our perspective. I'm not saying anybody in the kayak fishing community is negative or it's bad. It's just sometimes we have different feelings about how things are handled. But overall, that's the message that I think she's trying to convey, and I think she did it wonderfully. Highlight what you like about the kayak fishing community. Highlight the persons that you feel are building the kayak fishing community. That's it. And we're going to bring our next guest, Jody Quinn. Before that, thank you to my sponsor, Douglas Rod. Go check out douglasrodsoutdoors.com for their full lineup of LRS rods, X-Matrix rods, and award-winning fly fishing rods. We'll go to a quick commercial, and then we'll bring Jody Quinn. Mr. Jody Quinn, how are you, sir?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Honored to have you on my podcast, man.
Oh man, my honor to be here. Thank you.
You're one of those people that I think is a great ambassador to the sport. You're very talented and you have tons of information, like I said on my intro, that I think real people can really benefit from learning and becoming a better angler and being a great gentleman on or lady on the water. So thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, dude. And to what you're saying about I like to see people catch fish, and I know what works for me. I don't know what works for everybody, but I don't care to put it out there. How I catch fish, and maybe somebody will stumble onto something that they can use. But yeah, that's and that goes back to growing the sport, like you were talking too. I mean, the more people who uh, get into the sport, the better off the sport is. I think so we just try to we try to share information and try to get it out there for people to use, and who knows, maybe somebody will pick it up and say, hey, I want to try this, and get into this tournament scene. But it's not all tournament scene. There's ambassador clubs through KBF that you can get into. There's all kinds of things. We have 3 series now with the BOS and KBF and Bass right now. So there's a lot of choices out there once you want to make that turn. Bass has the Kayak Bass Nation. So there's a lot of ways now to get into the sport, and we have a lot. It's nice to have those choices. It tells us that the sport is growing.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the things that I mentioned that I failed to mention on the intro, on that same post that Christian Fisher was talking about the great actions, specifically about Gio, Guillermo Gonzalez, which, I mean, everyone that's involved in kayak fishing in the tournament scene knows how much Guillermo Gonzalez means to us. Not only, off on the water, but off the water. The guy's just a great human being, and we're so lucky to have him involved in our sport. I think he lifts the kayak fishing community, leading by actions, and that's great. But she also mentioned the importance of the KBF National Championship, which I know some people feel like, oh, everybody can qualify. As I've always said, the National Championship, we have to appreciate it for what it is and not judge it by what it's not. And what it is, it's a great tool. It's very important for the growth of the sport.
Yes.
When you look at the Hobie TOS, which I personally want to be a part of next year, or the Hobie BOS and qualify the T.O.C. I want to do it because I want to fish against you, Guillermo, Russ Snyders, Ewan Miners, Brian Howells, and kind of measuring stick and see how I do. And iron sharpens iron. If I'm on the water and I can talk to you after the tournament and I can get some tips for you, that's going to help me better. Just so I don't necessarily think that I'm going to beat anybody, but just, surrounding yourself by greatness on the water is going to make you a better angler. Having said that, it's hard, to qualify for the T.O.C. It's probably the hardest, most demanding tournament out there. It's what really separates. You can't say the boys from the men now, because we have girls fishing too. So I want to say from the adults from the children, in the sense that it's very competitive.
Yes.
But what the NC does for KBF, it lets those persons that are great anglers just don't have the time because of family commitment and work to travel, but fish their local waters and qualify and get a chance to compete at least for 1 week to compete with you guys and make a name for themselves. And I think that is so important for the growth of this sport. That national championship, although it may not have the glamour of the Bass Nation Kayak Series National Championship or the Hobie TOC, it does uplift everyone that kind of want to take part in this community. And that's awesome, because if everybody tries to, from the get-go, go into the Hobie TOC, it's going to be a lot of frustrations. That takes time to be able to compete with the names like yourself and everybody out there. And you can easily get frustrated, having that investment and not winning. So I really appreciate what KBF has done with the national championship.
Yeah.
And I think you can't understate how important it is for the growth of the community.
Yeah, I mean, I know that if you ask anybody in the administration of KBF, they will tell you, that tournament is meant to show where the sport is going, and it's inclusive. What KBF is going to do, I don't know if you're aware of this, in the next year or so, we're going to start building a pro tour or an elite series, kind of like MLF, and it's going to be a lot harder to get into that. But we'll always have, qualification through ambassador clubs and KBF and stuff like that. So there's pathways, and the NC was just, if you'd never been to a kayak tournament and to see that stage and and all the food and all the vendors and stuff like that, I mean, it's a big deal for someone, who has never. It was a big deal for me because I think it's one of the better NCs that I've been to. It's my favorite. But and the T.O.C. is what it is. It's set up. It's tournament of champions. So to qualify, you have to either finish like top 20 in the BOS season, or you have to top 20%, or you have to win a tournament. And as you know, and everybody knows, it's hard to win a tournament.
Yeah,
everybody gets out there and just say, "I'm gonna go win that tournament." There's a lot of factors that go into it, but it's more of an elite series, that's out there with that. And Bass Nation, you can qualify through some local partner clubs that they have in the Bass Nation Kayak Series. So I think there's room for these elite series now. I think that all three series, which Hobie's already doing it. I think that KBF is going to do it. I think that Bass, the Bass is going to have eventually might have a separate, like an elite series also. I don't know. That might be further down the road. I would like to see it. Yeah. But there are, in this sport, maybe 100 anglers who consistently, or maybe less, maybe 50 anglers who are always, in that top, like Guillermo and Matt Scotch and Corey Dryers and the, Cody Milton. There's a lot of those guys who finish. Russ Snyder's is another one, and they're all great ambassadors for the sport. But they are what I consider some of the elite anglers in the sport. And I think that since the sport has grown so much, we have a place for that now. We have those anglers in line, and those anglers who can actually be called elites, because of their records and stuff. So I think it's time. I think it's time that they branch out and form something like that for those anglers to fish. Now you can still qualify for those elite series, but it's like you say, it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, it's exciting to see where the sport is growing and being able to take part of this, at kind of still the infancy stages of the kayak fishing tournament. Is exciting to see it grow and be a part of it, for one way for the other, where we're doing a podcast or we're actually competing like you're doing yourself. And also social media content, which is always kind of hard when you're a tournament angler, also have a social media. We see how many great social media content creators out there, but not necessarily translate into kayak fishing success at an elite level. Yeah. Now you're starting your own YouTube channel, and I think that's awesome because, like I said on my intro, I've listened to that breakdown. One of my favorite ones was that breakdown you did last year for the Susquehanna River. When I think you were using, you were changing the willow blade on the for a Colorado blade on clear water, which is kind of goes against the conventional knowledge out there. So I thought that was podcast gold. I was like, man, it's a ton of information. But translating that now into your YouTube channel, I mean, tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel and what can people expect.
So my YouTube channel, it says Jody Queen Fishing, but it's going to be like a hodgepodge of information on different things like techniques, tactics, breaking down water. There's going to be recaps of tournaments and just general knowledge, but it's also going to have, what I do in my off time. And I say off time, but I'm busy all the time. I'm also the vice president of Gary Bowling's House of Art, which is a nonprofit organization that we have set up to help our local artists in Appalachia get us kind of a springboard into the art world. And I myself am a resident artist here. And so I'm going to bring my artwork into it. I'm also a musician. And so it's going to be it's going to encompass a lot about my life and what I do outside of fishing also. It'll mostly be fishing, but there'll be a few things in there, that just kind of spice it up a little bit. So, but I love sharing information, and a lot of people, I was at a tournament, I think it was KBF tournament, and the guys come up after and said, "Man, why are you sharing all that information?" I mean, I gave specific areas where I was fishing, but that stuff comes out. I mean, I've had people follow me to ramps. I've had, people, they tend to find out where you're fishing anyway. So until that starts hurting me and my chances, I'm going to continue to just put it all out there. I haven't noticed that it's really hurt my angling career any at all, actually. But I love talking to people at the ramp. If you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see it one I just posted of where Corey Dreyer and I were talking to a couple of guys at the ramp, and that's all a part of getting people into the sport. I get it at gas stations, I get it at boat ramps, I get it, at restaurants. People, they see your rig out there and they're intrigued by it, and those areas, those, I said this on my channel, those chance encounters can steer this sport in the right direction if you treat them right. So you need to understand that, that these people are genuinely interested. If they're coming up and taking time out of their life to come up and learn about what it is that you're doing, then you need to take the time, to converse with them some and let them know what's out there and available for them. And it's just good for the sport.
Yeah, and I think like your sponsors, I remember that video, I was just watching it, where you at the end gave him a couple of Seaman soft plastics. Yeah. And those are one-on-one connections that go beyond just algorithms, likes, shares and stuff like that. Just goes beyond that. And that's something that like a company like Seaman is still going to appreciate. And and you touched on something interesting, because there's a balance there, and I know there's going to be a dividing in opinion about this. Now, I understand you're not going to show techniques and breakdowns of a lake, of a tournament you're about to fish, and post it, or before the tournament, because you're not doing yourself a favor.
Right.
That I get. I wouldn't do that. Yeah. Now, I'm no expert tournament angler or even social media content creator. But I think after that, and I saw again, Christine Fisher posted one, and she had she met somebody on the water. Says, "Hey, you're probably regretting posting that of the Susquehanna River of using buzz baits last year." Says, "No, not at all." Yeah. And this is the point. This is where the transition grows. When you're competing, yes, there are certain information that you want to keep to yourself, right, in a timely basis. Now, like I mentioned, not before the tournament. However, when you start getting sponsors into you to help you, your livelihoods, help you,
right,
with the cost of tournament fishing and traveling, the way to grow that is doing social media. What it's going to attract social media is going to be information that you're going to provide that's going to help them be a better angler. You see what Gene Jensen has done in his career for as a Fluke Master brand. So there's that balance where, hey, if success is not just winning trophies, it's also bringing sponsorships to help you with the cost and help you maybe even make a living out of this. For that, you're going to have to put out information that people are going to say, "Oh, why are you putting out that information?" Well, because people are going to watch Jody Quinn not just for his good looks, right? But for his knowledge, for his knowledge and for what he brings and to learn. So there's a give and take right there. A great angler is still going to be a great angler. And if that information just stays with this group of elite anglers, what's going to happen is only the same names are going to come up every single time on every tournament. And that gets stale, and it's going to frustrate anybody that wants to get into the tournament. Says, well, then what am I going to do over there if I'm just donating money to this group of elite anglers that have this information to themselves? So there's a balance to be strict now, and not me to say where that balance lies, where the line lies. That's very personal. But I think that's a conversation that each one of us has to have when we're talking about the growth of the sport as well as the growth of your brand.
So you got to kind of tip the balance toward the new person coming in. I agree with you. There's some things that I won't reveal, the day before the tournament, like what I found, or what areas I'm fishing or something like that. But, it, one thing about being a high profile angler is that most people out there already know what you're using anyway. I mean, Corey and I were known as jackhammer guys. I mean, we throw jackhammers, and I go by the philosophy that if you're on any given lake at any given time, somewhere on that lake is a jackhammer bite. It just is. I mean, whether you find it or not is another thing. But plastics, McFaddy Z's, shaky heads. I love to throw shaky heads. I love to throw spinner baits. And those baits, when people start following you and start, like getting on your channel and stuff like that, they realize, most of the time that's what you're throwing. So that information is already out there. So you got to kind of tip it in the favor of the people that are coming into the sport in order to get them interested in it. Like you said, nobody wants to just go give up their money all the time. But if somebody is genuinely interested in getting into the sport, they're going to try learning from each of the Christine Fishers and the Cody Miltons and the Russ Snyders and and the Guillermo Gonzalez's. They're going to search out those people and learn their techniques, and they will get better. All of a sudden, they'll turn up in the top 5 in some local tournament, and then all of a sudden they'll say, "Well, hey, I can go on to the big tournament." It's a path that you got to take if you're going to do this, and so you surround yourself with successful people in the sport, and you'll pick it up. Subscribe to Christine Fisher. She does it better than just about anyone. Doing the live recaps and during the tournament videos and stuff. You subscribe to those people, and you're going to learn. You will. And you'll get better, and you'll get better. The competition is getting way stiffer right now in this sport.
Yep.
I mean, I can see it coming, and that's what's making room for these elite series. So, I mean, there's going to be a time like in KBF, there's going to be a time when we're not even allowed to fish the challenge series if you're in the elite series. So it's getting there,
Yeah.
So, but right now it's getting people into the sport, getting the sponsors' eyes turned our way. I mean, we want big non-endemic sponsors. We want the built bars and the deck systems and DZ, who is already in the sport and does wonderful things, and Toyota and Nissan. We want those big non-endemic sponsors to turn our way, and in order to do that, we're going to have people in the sport. We're going to have that elite series. We're going to have qualifications. We're going to have a bigger base as far as ambassador series and kayak bass nations, and we're going to have that on the local part of it too. We're going to have all of that in order for this thing to get up to where we're, the elite series is fishing for $100,000 a tournament, $50,000 for a tournament, and then $250,000 for a championship. That's where we want to be in the sport for the anglers who have dedicated their lives to it, and it's not out of reach for anybody.
No.
I think the market is just not saturated, dude. There's room for all of it right now. Like you say, we're so young, and the sport's growing so fast right now, and we got to keep that momentum and get people interested in it.
Yeah, no, and depth water. Everything has been so we can always, there may be one little thing that happened that wasn't like we would have liked, but we can still, ignore that and just talk about the great things that happen and the great ambassadors for the sport like yourself. And that's a great point that you mentioned, because if as elite anglers try to keep it just, this is just for us,
right?
It's not gonna grow. Sponsors not endemic sponsors not gonna get involved. The names are not gonna change. It's not gonna be. You're not gonna be able to get the growth of the sport both in the popularity and money, which one is tied to the other. So that's a great point.
And if you're, like you say, if you're doing this and you're keeping all the information to yourself, and you're not sharing, and you're not, interacting with the public, and you're not doing all those things, then you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want, then
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably tell you, I'm not like that. I want to see the sport grow. I want to be a part of the progression of the sport, and so does Christine Fisher and Guillermo and all those guys that are fishing at the level that they're fishing at right now. They want this to progress, because it's what we do. It's this is my life. This is what I do for a living. This is so we have to share that information. If not, we're just doing it for ourselves.
Yeah. And the more people that get into it and can make a living out of it,
Yes.
the more money you make, even if you're not winning a tournament. Now, when it becomes more accessible to people to make a living out of it, guess what? For those that are already doing it, like yourself, it makes it even more easier to win out of it. Even if there's more competition, it makes it just easier, because that means more money is coming into the sport, more sponsorship.
Absolutely.
So, talking a little bit now about the tournaments, you've had a very lustrous career when it comes to kayak fishing, in my opinion, and I've had Ryan Lambert on my podcast not that long ago, and we were talking about who we think were the best anglers right now. My vote, I'll be honest with you, not because I have you here, but I said I think Jody Quinn. It's just because of not just at the moment, but what you've done over the last couple of years in the kayak fishing community. How would you describe your career? How do you see yourself as a tournament angler, and where do you rank yourself?
I don't get into like ranking myself. I think it's kind of embarrassing, but I just try to get out there and do the best I can do. I do think that right now I'm at the top of the game, I guess, of the list of some of the top anglers. My name is always in there. I'm very fortunate to do what I do, and very fortunate to have the people that support me. But when I started this thing, I was 50 years old when I started this thing. And this speaks to the accessibility of the sport. When I first started doing this, what really got me into kayaks was the Virginia DNR. They had a program about 6 years ago. They were running kayaks and checking licenses. People. I was a weight fisherman at the time, and I was checked 3 or 4 times by some DNR agents. Checking license and stuff. And I just got to talking to them about the kayaks and seeing how they had their rigs and all their stuff in it, and it was really neat. So I went and bought a kayak, and I was hooked. People like Drew Gregory, who designed the Kusa, which was my first boat. Just to be mentioned in the same arena with those guys is very humbling, because I pretty much came from nothing. But I won my first tournament, and I knew I was hooked. That was it. The first tournament I ever fished, I won it, and I went home and told my wife, I said, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And she immediately got behind me. And without her support, I don't think, I would be here today. But that's very important to have that support factor if you're going to do this full time like I do. But I have been, I really don't look at the disappointments. I'm disappointed. I was poised to take the Angler of the Year this year. I had a bad first day, which I had 86 inches. And I knew right then, I'm probably not going to get Angler of the Year, because they were whacking them on a different lake. And, but you don't dwell on that. Mm-hmm. I've been in that position before. Last year, I was up there. I've made the 10. This is my 5th time making the 10. So, my consistency is what I pray for. I'd like to be consistently first, but it doesn't work that way. So I try not to dwell on that. I fish a tournament. I do the best I can. I leave it all out there on the lake, and then I move on to the next tournament. And that's all you can do. If you let that get in your head and seep into your head, you'll get into a rut, and you'll get frustrated, and then you make bad decisions. And So you just try to put it behind you. And plus, like Guillermo, man, he is a really good friend of mine. I love Guillermo. He is just, like you say, he's a great human being. Cody Milton, he's one of my favorites. I love him. They're great representatives of the sport, and they're great people away from the sport too. So, that helps too. And just being here doing what I'm doing is enough for me. I mean, I've won a few things that kind of set me apart, and I'm lucky for that. But I'm just another angler to me. I just can't wait. I just can't wait till the next one. I'm looking forward to the T.O.C, man, and I'm looking forward to the team. And that's all I'm looking forward to.
I mean, and to qualify five years in a row now, you said for the 10. That's impressive.
Well, me and Josh Stewart are tied for the most qualifications for the 10. So.
That is impressive because that's not easy to qualify with. We talk about the KBF, and not KBF on the Hobie BOS and the T.O.C, how hard it is to qualify. But I mean, the 10 is probably even harder because it's less. And there's so many people fishing KBF now.
It's very elite. I mean, this is the top 10 in points, and there's no way around it. I mean, it just is what it is. I think what really attributes a lot of that success is time on the water, though, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you notice that some of the people that are always in the 10 or always in the T.O.C, they spend a pretty good amount of time on the water, so they know what's going on. And I think that's a big thing in this sport is having that time on the water. So if anybody's listening out there, I suggest you spend some time on the water because you learn things, man. Yeah. You learn things.
I think YouTube and podcasts, like the Bass Fishing for Noobs, the one we have on Paddle and Fin, that's for teaching techniques. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great base, right? A foundation for what you're learning. And then time on the water is when you learn really how to apply it. And if it applies to the body of water,
when you get on the water, it's that aha moment, that's when and you catch that fish using the technique that you've seen on YouTube, and you catch a fish using that technique. That's the aha. Oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the way to do it, man. There's all kinds of information out there. It's a vast amount of information on fishing out there if you take the time to look it up, and then when you can apply it, that's when it starts. You get better and better and better,
And it is interesting for me, and I am no elite tournament angler or anything like that, but going through the kind of like the bluegrass trails here local in Texas, just watching my progression, going from skunking the first 3 events till the 4th event, actually catching 1 and having come off my board, to then catching 2, to catching 3, and then to came up second on Lake Fork. There's no moment that things like, oh, it clicked. Oh, now it clicked. No, it's just a progression that little by little you start seeing the effects. There's no oh yes, epiphany moment. This is how it's done. No, it's just little progression, and something might click for the for me, it was fishing on spawning season. That kind of clicked for me this year, but that's only a small window for 2 weeks. What about the rest of the year? So it's progression.
Yeah. It's a cumulative experience of being there. You might learn how to use a worm or one time and say, "Oh, I get it," and you might use a spinnerbait the next time. "Oh, I get it." And when it's that accumulative knowledge and experience, that makes you a great angler. But it all takes time on the water. Yeah.
And going back to what you mentioned on the Susquehanna River on 2020, I mean, that I listened to that, and that's still, that of all the podcasts that I've listened to, I think that's the one that I remember more, that's ingrained into my my memory. It's just you talking about how you changed the blades on the spinnerbait and how you casting it and retrieving it. And I'm like, man, there is no YouTube video that's gonna tell you that is knowledge, and that's that it factor that only comes when you're out there on the water. There's no other way, and just kind of like experimenting. Oh, like, let me see the, and you mentioned something like the jackhammer.
Yes.
I've forced myself not to throw a jackhammer because, like, I had Jake Harshman on my podcast saying it'll make above average angler out of mediocre angler, and I'm leaving proof of that. Before I started throwing jackhammers, I would struggle to get a bite. Now I can get 5 bites. And it's great, but it's like I don't want to get stuck in just one bait. As effective as it is, I want to learn. So sometimes I just purposely, I'm going to leave the box of jackhammers on the garage, and I'm not going to even take them so I can learn, and expand my knowledge.
Yeah. So it's easy to get caught up in a bait, man. If you're just starting out and you pick up, I can remember the year of the Whopper Plopper. I mean, everybody was catching them on a Whopper Plopper. I mean, it was just, and we were wearing the fish out, and then it started slowing down. But there was a lot of people who continue to throw them when they should have been throwing something else. So it's easy to get caught up in a bait and try to force the bite. So you gotta learn to know when to put it down. I mean, there's been a couple of times I love to throw a jackhammer. That's one of my favorite baits to throw, and anybody can tell you that. I mean, but there's times when they're just not hitting it, or I just can't figure out how they want it, or something like that. And you need to make adjustments. Making adjustments is one of the most important things about this business, man. You got to be able to make adjustments and make the right ones. So yeah, don't get caught up and try to force the bite a lot of times with these baits, even though
I don't know why it reminded me of Kenny Rogers in that song The Gambler. You got to know when to hold and when to fold them. I don't know why that popped into my mind, but that really does apply. You got to know.
Analogy fits, man.
Yeah, analogy fits. So going into the T.O.C, Jody, what are you looking forward to the most? I know we talked on the pre-show. You haven't fished that lake. You're gonna learn about that lake when you pre-fish it, so you don't have any history with the lake. Right. But I mean, when you look at the lake and look at the competition, I mean, without obviously giving out techniques and stuff like that, how do you see this shaping up for you, and what do you think you have to like work on, or what's your thought process?
Yeah, I'm just going to put a GPS tracker on Guillermo, and
probably a good idea.
No, man. I mean, it's one of those lakes. It's a pretty shallow lake, and I fished a lot of these lakes before, Alabama lakes, and you go into it. I go into it with some knowledge of comparison. You can compare these lakes to some of the other shallow lakes that you fish. Like actually, the lake I just came off of, which is down at Caddo, it's a shallow lake, but it's got a lot of cypress in it. Now, from what I've done the research on Eufaula, and I'm still in the middle of researching it, is like the lower end of the lake. I think it has a lot of brush piles and stuff. And I've talked to a few people that say, this time of the year is a good time to hit the brush piles. The middle of the lake, I heard fish is a little bit different than the rest of the lake. And the head of the lake, of course, you got the, what is that runs into it? The Choctawhatchee, or what is that? Chattahoochee. It feeds it.
Chattahoochee, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you can get up and do the river fishing thing, which I'm sure Drew Gregory's probably going to be up one of them creeks, but Drew's a hammer man, that he loves a paddle. So you got, there's a lot of different things I'm going to have to check when I get there, but I'm not going to rule out shallow water. There's always, fish in shallow water. And the thing about shallow water fish is they're usually there for a reason. So, I mean, most of the fish that are running shallow are active fish. The time of the year, I mean, it could be cool, have a few cool nights down there. It could put them in on the shad and start schooling some. I mean, it's just something I'm going to have to check out when I get there, But I'm going to have all of that in my head when I get there, and try to do as much of it as I can. And hopefully I'll stumble onto a good pattern. Just got to get out there and eliminate water.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching, like I said, I was watching your YouTube channel today. That's one of the things that I like when you mentioned about, can't remember the lake you were fishing, but you didn't catch anything. And you're like, well, it's not a bad thing. Actually, it might be a good thing. Now I know this body of water will eliminate it. So we're going to move on to the next body of water for the next day of pre-fishing. Right. And I think that to me, that's kind of like what I struggle with, because I don't, being fishing regional tournaments, I don't get that much time to go pre-fish 2 or 3
Right.
times a day. And
Right.
I think that is so important, being able to
Mm-hmm.
pre-fish. Like myself, I
It
can't
is.
find I don't know how it is. I don't know how to
Yeah.
pre-fish. I guess it's what I'm trying to say, and that's such an important part of any tournament angler, as an evolution of a tournament angler. What's going to get you better is being able
Right.
to pre-fish, especially when you're talking about tournaments that are like 2 or 3 days now, because now you really have to have knowledge, because
Yeah.
basically the key is catching
Right.
15 fish, and you only
Yeah.
get one day to catch five, second day catch five. So
Right.
every day you have to catch five, and if you're
Right.
not, it's very different when it's a 1 day tournament. If you didn't pre-fish it, you kind of, you can't. As anglers, we kind of know where the fish hang out at each time
Yep.
of the year. Now we don't know it specifically, but when you're not, if you're 1 day tournament, you can stumble upon them, have a great day, and take the win.
Right.
But when we're talking about 2 or 3 tournaments, you now have to have a knowledge, especially 3 day tournaments, which is what the T.O.C and the national championship was. It's, you really have to have, not, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, as
It
far
is.
as spots and baits, and that
Look,
only comes with pre-fishing.
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, on a 3-day tournament, or like the TOC 2-day or 3-day tournament, you gotta have that amount of fishing there that's going to sustain you for those 3 days. And yeah, you're right. You have to have backup plans. But what you can do to kind of give yourself a little bit of an edge is the areas that you're fishing. Like sometimes when I do my research, and again, this is just stuff that I do. I mean, it might not work for everybody, but I use Google Earth a lot, and
Yeah.
you can go back and do the histories, of Google Earth, and find out when there's low water times, and you can find a lot of cover that way. But one of the big things, like on Navionics, you can find areas that contain the type of structure where fish can hold in any given day, or in any given conditions. Like uh, try to find areas that have a big flat, with maybe some timber on it, or lay downs or something on it. But also in that same area, try to add, a deep channel that runs out, some channel swings that you might have to travel to get to a little bit, long points, 45-degree banks, or whatever. Try to find areas of the lake when you're pre-fishing that have all of those things, so you can check them, all at one time. And if you find an area that has all those things and you're not catching fish on anything, you're not catching fish off points, then you better get up and move and go to a different area, and just because you've eliminated that water. So if you can pull into a ramp and say, okay, I'm gonna, I know there's a big flat here, and you can hit that flat, and you don't do no good on it, and you can hit a channel swing and you don't do that good on it, or you hit points or steep banks and you don't do that good on it, you've eliminated that water. The other part is figuring out the right baits for those areas. On flats, I love to throw a jackhammer on flats, on wood, and lay downs or whatever that are laying in open flats are usually big fish magnets.
Yep.
If I'm running running steep banks and points, I mean, a jig is always good to have tied on. You can throw that. If you're a cranking guy, you can throw some crankbaits this time of the year, usually kicking up, and you can run them crankbaits down those rocky banks and stuff. And you can flip to lay downs or whatever. There's a lot of different things you can cover in a day in an area like that if you have it all at your fingertips.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I think once you get to the elite level, especially when we're talking about this group of guys and girls that are at the elite level, is not only do you have to learn how to fish, you have to learn how to pre-fish.
Yeah.
That's what you touched on, something that's,
Yeah.
I think it's probably the most underrated part about tournament fishing. It's like, okay, you know the body of water, but you got to learn, and that's, I mean, again, that's why I love hearing you, because you touch on a gem right there that kind of, like, to me is like, yeah, mind blown. Never thought about that. When you're going to pre-fish, it's not like, okay, I'm going to this body of water, let me pre-fish it. No, let's find an area where it holds,
Yep.
like you said, like a bend, a flat, structure, and I'll start pre-fishing that area because that area is more accessible. And if it doesn't work, then you go to plan B. I've never would have thought about that,
Well,
and that is pretty awesome information.
one of the big things about that, the reason why I do that is, and as kayak anglers, we don't have the luxury of picking up and running 30 miles to check
Yeah.
out the area. So we have to be really, really careful with the amount of time we spend in these areas because we have to load up and move to another ramp, and and I do that a lot. Sometimes I'll come in after spending the morning somewhere, and if I don't do no good, I'll go to another morning in the afternoon or another place in the afternoon. So kayak anglers are way more intimate with the areas that they fish than most of the boats because we don't have that luxury of picking up and moving. So figure out the area, figure out the spots in the area. I mean, even like the brush piles on Eufaula, a lot of those are man-made. The man-made cover comes into it also. So just try to get all that, make a list, try to get all that in your head of what you want to do, and try to get it. You might find a pattern before you get through all of them. You might say, "Oh wow, I've got it now," and you might not have to go to those other spots. But generally, you need to check all the cover that's available to you in those areas.
Yeah, that is, like I said, information gold when it comes to learning how to fish and tournament fish. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Jody, I know you're, like I said, you're a busy man. I don't want to keep you too long. We already been talking for a few minutes and almost an hour. So I really appreciate, it's an honor to have you on my podcast. I really appreciate the time. I wanted to go over for real quick question because I've been meaning to ask this, and I'm glad I have you on because I think you're one of the best persons to ask this. When we talk about sports, you see in contact sports, whether it's one-on-one sports like tennis or team sports like soccer, football, and basketball, you see players, athletes that have that it factor, that clutch gene, so to speak, the Mamba mentality. I'm not a Lakers fan, but anyways, I respect Kobe. Kayak fishing is different because it's not just one-on-one, you against Guillermo, Russ Snyder, or Drew Gregory. It's also you against the bass.
Yeah.
Do you think there's such a thing as a clutch gene when it comes to kayak fishing? The reason why I ask this is like you've been victimized, for example, like with Guillermo Gonzalez, you had 109 inches and that kid 17 minutes ago, and he puts up 110 inches.
Right.
I was watching the T.O.C. and watching the T.O.C. I noticed I'm a big numbers guy, and I noticed Guillermo had a couple of 20s and about 3 18s. And I saw Cody Milton had a couple of 20s, and he had a 116. And I posted on KBN, it's like, Cody he only needs an inch and a half to upgrade. He's going to take the lead at some point, and time is running out. Because it was a given, the way that national championship was fishing, that he was going to upgrade that 16-inch, which was a lot easier than Guillermo trying to upgrade an 18-inch.
Right.
So I saw when Cody upgraded, and then Guillermo clutch again kind of upgraded. When you see what Guillermo is doing and other anglers are doing, do you think there's such a thing as a clutch or an it factor when for some anglers?
I don't think it's genetic. I think it's knowing the area you're in and knowing what your capabilities are within that area. I mean, case in point, when we were down there fishing there at Fort Worth in the KBF down there, and I had 109 inches. When Guillermo was coming back down the bank, he happened to hit a spot that had those big fish, and he loaded up on them, and that's the way it happens. In this last tournament when I was fishing, I was like on day 2. I think I upgraded like 8 inches in the last 20 minutes. And on day 3, I upgraded 6 inches in the last 20 minutes. So I think it's more attitude. Never give up. Like Akinelli says, never give up. There's a lot of truth in that. Guillermo never gives up. And Cody Milton never gives up. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest comeback guys in the business is Corey Dreyer. I have seen him come back from man, you just think there's no way. And in the last 10 minutes, I seen him catch a fish in the last 30 seconds and get a picture of it. He had 3 seconds left in the tournament and got that picture in and ended up winning that tournament. And it's guys like that who just don't have the quit in them, you know. Maybe it is a competitive gene, but you can't stop what you're doing and worry about, oh, well, you know, there's no way I can do that, or there's no way I can do that, because most of these lakes, you're one cast away from a 5 or 6 or 7 pounder anyway. Yep. So you got to stay on it, keep doing what you're doing, and you know that tournament. Well, I'll never forget that tournament, but it's not. Yeah. It's not because that I lost the tournament. It came in second. I feel like I won that tournament. I mean, yeah. I had an 11-pound fish in that tournament, and I spent the last hour just basically I didn't really fish the last probably 45 minutes of that tournament, you know. So it went to somebody who I admire and somebody who I think deserved it. And, you know, we're good friends, Guillermo, and if I'm going to lose to somebody, I'd just as soon it be him as anybody. So you win some, you lose some. You're not going to win them all. And as long as you get out and do your best, it doesn't matter if you come in 8th, 9th, 10th, or 2nd. I've had 3 or 4 second place finishes this year. Last year I had 3 or 4 first place finishes. You know, you just got to keep grinding, man. You just got to keep grinding. Casey Reed's a good friend of mine, man. He's another hammer, and he's been on the bubble for the 10, I think 3 times. He's been 11th. He came in 11th again this year trying to qualify for the 10. And, you know, and you talk to him, he's like, I'm going to get it next year. I'm going to get it next year. It's that mental attitude and mental fortitude you have to just keep going, man. You just got to keep grinding and know that you're doing the best that you can do, and it's going to pay off. It will come back to you.
No, definitely. And props to you, Jody, because when I was fishing that tournament, I was looking at the leaderboard like 30 minutes before, and I noticed they never took the leaderboard out, which I thought was awesome. Yeah. That worked perfect for that tournament.
Yeah.
And I noticed you were ahead, and I know you were fishing. You parked in the same boat ramp that I was kind of fishing the same general area. So I was like, man, I want to meet Jody and congratulate him. As I see you loading up, I'm paddling through you, and I take the look at the leaderboard, thinking there's no way nobody got more than 109. And I was like, oh, shoot, Guillermo just upgraded. Now he's 110. Yeah. And I was like, oh, man, well, that's going to change my conversation with Jody. Yeah. And you were still all smiles. Like, I remember going to you. I'm like, Jody, you feel bad? He's like, I'm not. You were smiling from ear to ear. I'm like, I would see smiling right now.
That was the best day. You know, the only thing that came close was I had a tournament in the Pro Series last year where I had 100.5 inches in like 45 minutes. That day was better than that day. I mean, 109 inches in a tournament. What did I have to be sad about? You know,
yeah, I know, right?
I mean, you know, and I mean, it was and that 11-pounder. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. There was nothing that was going to take that away from me. Even if it was coming in second, I felt like I won anyway. So, you know, like I say, Guillermo, he deserved it, and he deserves all the accolades and everything he does, man. He's a great human being, and I wish him all the success in the world. And you know what? I know that he wishes me the same thing. So,
yeah,
you know, and that's what makes this sport what it is, man. You know. It's the camaraderie between the anglers, and you know, you see an angler broke down on the side of the road, you stop, you do this, you do that. You see people at the ramp, you try to help out. I mean, it's just it's a good feeling to be surrounded by the people that are in this sport. When you're out there fishing, you know somebody's got your back 99.9% of the time. You know, so you just got to keep going, man. Keep grinding. And I'm looking forward to the next season after the T.O.C. here. I'm going to try to focus on that, and whatever happens there happens. But I've got another tournament after that, and another tournament after that, and another tournament after that. So, you know, you can't dwell on the past.
Yeah. amnesia comes in handy especially when you're having a bad trail.
Yeah,
Just forget it and just
that's
hop.
right. That's right.
Get on that horse and try it again.
I'm not saying that I'm never disappointed. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
Or I'm not saying that I never get frustrated. You have to recognize that that's what you are, and then just move
yeah.
on from it, because it'll eat a hole in you if you dwell
If
on it.
you if you're not frustrated, I don't
Yeah.
think you're really having success. You're being complacent. I think
Right.
at some point you
Yeah.
have to be frustrated
Yeah.
because you're not always gonna win. So it's a good thing. It's a healthy thing.
It is. It's healthy.
It's a yin to the yang kind of thing.
That's right. That's right. That's the balance. Yep.
Yeah. Jody, we're so honored in the kayak fishing community and the tournament thing to have you. Again, you're a great ambassador to the sport.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
We're lucky to have you, and I know with people like you on the sport, it's. I mean, the sky's the ceiling for this sport. So we thank you for all you do in the social media, the community, and the tournament. We love what you're doing on the water. You're also a great angler, somebody we look up to on and off the water. I know I've had you for almost an hour, and I really want to give you a few minutes for you to thank your sponsors. I know you thank your wife. You probably want to thank her again. So I'll leave you a few minutes for that, man. If whoever you want to thank her, just go ahead.
Man, since I've started this thing, I have a few sponsors that have really supported me, like Yak Attack. I mean, if it twists or turns or screws or holds something, or your dip net or your lights, it's all Yak Attack for me. And those guys have always been there for me, and they make great products. Big shout out to them. Z-Man Baits. In the last 2 years, man, I don't know what to say. I mean, that's pretty much the only baits that I use.
Yep.
Very few situations where I'm not using a Z-Man product, and they've done really well for me. Catch boards, Duke Westcamp, man, he makes, he's an innovator. Not one of my sponsors, but Denny Romero, he makes the trailers, the on the water innovations, man, they're great trailers. He's not one of my sponsors, but I like to give a shout out to good products. NRS, they're not one of my sponsors, but I give them a shout out because they make great products. And of course, Cash and Rods, man. I mean, their attention to detail. Corey and I we got this new line of rods that are coming out. It's called the Kayak series, and you can check them out at cashandrods.com. But we had a hand in designing these rods, and they have listened to us on every turn, and we have sent prototype after prototype back, and I know they're aggravated with us, but we don't want to put out something that's not right. And the new Chattergrass rod that's coming out it's going to be money, dude. It's going to be money. I've been using the prototype for a year and a half, and I've tried every way in the world to break that rod. I've high stick fish. I've run it into docks and everything, and the action is perfect for heavy grass. It is a technique specific rod for heavy grass like Gunnersville and South Florida and Kissimmee and Bellsmere and those real heavy areas of grass. Give them a try, man. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. A big shout out to all the series: Bass, Hobie, KBF. I mean, those guys are leading the way for anglers like me, and their hard work is what keeps me going. And Dakota Lithium, who powers all my electronics, my lights on my boats and stuff, and they're just a great company. Got the best warranty in the business. I mean, there's good products. I won't get behind anything that I don't think is a good product. So that's why I don't have a whole lot of sponsors. I just have a good set of sponsors. And I think that's about it.
I mean, you've earned every single bit of those sponsors, man, with what you do, again, on and off the water. They should all be proud of having you on their team. So, and lucky to have you on their team.
Of the sport, man.
Thank you so much, Jody. Jody, again, thank you. We talked for an hour, so I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Hey, man, my pleasure.
We look forward to what you do on the T.O.C. and the 10, man. Good luck to everything that you do, not this year, but moving forward. And again, can't thank you enough. For those out there listening, thank you again so much for joining the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. If you made it this far, please, if you're going to be on the water, stay safe, wear your PFDs, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Jody, again, thank you, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.